So, hi everyone, and welcome to this month's edition of the CNU Real Places webcast. And on this month's edition, we have joining us two wonderful new urbanists from one from Buffalo and one based in Detroit. And that's Bernice Radle and David Alade. We've brought on these two guests today because they've been able to do some incredible work to transform their communities, incremental development, and creating some new opportunities in communities that were oftentimes perhaps lagging behind a little bit in this type of housing and needed some revitalization and more communities and more equity. So I'm going to kick it off and just introduce Bernice Radle with Buffalove Development. Bernice, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Bernice. I live in Buffalo, New York. And yes, we have a lot of snow and chicken wings, but I promise it's amazing. I work in real estate development, but particularly I do small scale, community-based, equitable, compassionate real estate development in the city of Buffalo. Everything I do has affordable housing component, an energy efficiency component, a quality component. I'm always aiming for quality and health and safety. And so we have a team of 20. We do everything. We're full service. I can buy, sell, renovate, manage, maintain, rehab, anything that we need to do to create really cool cutie pie places to call home.
Thanks, Bernice. And next I want to introduce David Alade with Century Partners. And David is based in Detroit. David, could you tell us a little bit about your company and your work?
Yeah, sure. So my company is Century Partners. We were founded about almost 5 years ago now in 2014. And we thought we had an opportunity to do development a little bit differently. I'm from New York City, and time again, I've seen development come in tandem with displacement. And we thought Detroit, given its rich legacy of homeownership, its already existing kind of talent pool and resilient population, along with unfortunately, a large supply of vacant houses, we thought there'd be an opportunity to go into these neighborhoods, hire people who live there, get people, the community to invest alongside with us, and develop certain neighborhoods without displacing anybody. And I think that could be a new model for how development is done in certain places where you can do it thoughtfully, you can do it with the community's ultimate good in mind. You can bring people to a community, newcomers that will be embraced by the community if they respect what's there, the history and the people who live there, and do it all without displacing the people who made those communities unique and investable in the first place, who didn't give up on their community when they definitely had an opportunity to do so during some of its rougher times.
Thanks, David. So it's apparent that both of you have a really amazing social justice fabric woven into the work that you do, or central to the work that you do. And that's a lot of that is jibing with the Building Local Strength report. That's something that CNU is trying to make sure that we're including in every aspect of our work, across from freeways without futures to building local strength to the Project for Code Reform. So I've got the first question for Bernice, and I'd like to say, Bernice, on your blog, you mentioned that the hardest buildings to bring back to life are often the smallest ones. We've heard from CNU members, it's always better to rehab something that's already there than tear it down, build something new. But could you tell us a story about how you've been able to overcome the regulatory hurdles that oftentimes will really disproportionately stymie the small scale developers who are doing the types of work that you are doing?
Absolutely. How much time do I have to talk? I'm kidding. It's a long process. I'm just teasing. So everything we do is small scale. I'm a faculty member of the Incremental Development Alliance as well. I'm always preaching small baby buildings. I believe that our small mixed-use buildings, this is where dreams come true. You can open a storefront, you can live behind it, you can rent out the upper apartment, so that way that renter's paying your space rent if you're a business owner, whatever. So small buildings are really challenging, basically because the numbers don't necessarily work as well, because you have a lot of upfront work, you still have legal fees, you still have permits and all this brain damage and pain and challenge. It's just hard. And often contractors don't want to answer your phone calls to fix a door, or in fact, I got tired of firing contractors. So I just started my own construction company, because I couldn't hire a contractor to come and handle these little tiny buildings. It just didn't make sense for them. Our whole world is built based on scale. Our financial models are scale, and so all of these little legacy buildings in our towns and cities are incredibly important. And very few people are saving them because they just take so much time. So I would say a couple of things. One, we overhauled our zoning code in Buffalo, New York. We have the Buffalo Green Code, and I'm on the zoning board of appeals for the city. I'm the vice chair, and I am a huge zoning nerd, and it was really a magical thing. We immediately stripped all of these, we called it the Elvis Code for a reason. All these suburban regulations were just gone. We got rid of our minimum parking requirements. We put in an adaptive reuse permit, which allowed our historic buildings to be more adaptive, which is really good. So we were able to overhaul our zoning code, and I think that was a huge help for regulation. The other thing is, I started working in cash. I found investor cash, and this sounds silly, but financial regulations, finances, banks, they often, in places like Buffalo, places like Detroit, I'm sure David will talk about, people look at you crazy when you want to invest $150,000 into a building that's worth 80 or 50 or $1, which I have purchased, So I think figuring out a way to work in cash, whether it's finding investors that want to do well by doing good, or finding community partners, that's been really helpful. Overhauling your zoning code, really helpful. And then also not based on a regulation necessarily, but because I do everything in-house, it allows me to keep my costs down, and it allows me to keep my rents down. It allows me to keep the flow of the construction work moving. I don't have to wait for people or for subsidies. And by the way, everything I do is without subsidy. I don't apply for grants. I don't do anything. I don't have time for that. I am not a patient person. So I guess that would probably be my top three: is zoning, working in cash, especially in these, really tough markets, and becoming more versatile with your business so you can handle renovating these cutie pie little buildings.
Amazing. So thanks, Bernice, for that overview. And that really goes into the story of everything that you've been able to accomplish in Buffalo. Well, just a bit. We don't have enough time to talk about everything, but I'd like to take this over to David to talk about Atkinson Street. Detroit was in the middle of Chapter 9 bankruptcy, and you and your partners, you took a chance on a dream and purchased and renovated homes in this historic corridor of Detroit, and it's been an amazing story to watch unfold. Why Atkinson?
Why not? No, I think if you look at one thing, my business partner and I, we fell in love with just the history of Detroit. And the history of this place is second to none. This was you call the Silicon Valley of the universe for half a century with the automobile industry. Before that, this was a massive international shipping hub, given its proximity to Canada. It butts the Canadian border. This was the birthplace of techno, birthplace of Motown. So from a cultural perspective, Detroit had such a powerful, German, there we go. Yeah. So in fact, we have the biggest techno festival in the world, the movement, it's here, in Detroit. Then from a political perspective, this place led the world, led the country, so many political movements, especially, equity for folks of color, for a lot of the great migration folks who immigrated post, Reconstruction from the South, to the Midwest. You had MLK, Malcolm X, they all had really strong political roots here. So this was a place that always innovated. And to go from, you could say a place that represents modernity for the entire world to the large municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history, for us, the opportunity to play a part in that was something we couldn't pass up. And we look at Atkinson Street specifically. Atkinson Street, it sits just south of a neighborhood called Boston Edison, one of the biggest historical neighborhoods in the country, really. So during the recession, Boston Edison didn't get hit too hard. Prices did decrease a bit, but it didn't get destroyed like other areas in the city. And we looked at this street called Atkinson Street, and it had a lot of the similarities from a housing topology perspective that Boston Edison. Beautiful brick structures built between 1905 and 1920. Really strong kind of structural foundations. But the price difference between just this one block difference was massive. It could be as much as 90%. A house that was $100,000 on Edison and one block south in Atkinson was $10,000. And so we thought, all right, well, this is unnatural. What if we, hired people in the neighborhood? What if we really did a concentrated investment strategy? So we're not just doing one-offs, but we're rehabbing 10 to 12 houses at a time. What if we were able to reduce the blight? There's a lot of blight, a lot of vacancy, the crime. We did really, it took a comprehensive approach to, really focusing on this one street, what could happen? And that's what we did. We started with one house in 2014, and at our peak, I think we're up to 12 units at a time on Atkinson, just on this one street. And we saw the neighborhood dramatically transform. We saw, other people coming in, and they said, oh, you guys seem to be investing a lot of money into these houses and getting really great tenants because of it. You're not slumlording the house out. Let me do the same. Let me, pick up a house here and do a really high quality rehab. We saw some of I would say the people who were most skeptical of our intentions at the beginning, they became our most ardent supporters. And now that asset prices were rising, they have some equity in their homes to maybe fix their roof or get around and fixing their porch, or you're maybe even paying more attention to their lawn care. We had other people who lived in the neighborhood for a long time. They saved the neighborhood. They bought the abandoned house next door to them for a couple $100, but they boarded it up and they mowed it every week. They were able to invest alongside with us with their dollars, so they would benefit. Instead of just a developer coming in and getting all the upside, we have folks in the community investing alongside with us that were getting that appreciation. And we'd raise the money like Bernice did from our investors, our friends, family who believes in our crazy mission to fix up these houses. Oftentimes, the renovation budget is 10 times what the cost, of the home, if not more. And we do the property management ourselves. We get the renters. We manage the construction ourselves. We've now created a real estate brokerage, as well as a construction company like Bernice, really to maximize those efficiencies. And more importantly, to make sure that the people that we're working with care about the folks in these communities as much as we do. And we found that to be successful.
Thanks, David. It's so fascinating. There's a lot of similarities between the work that you're doing and how it lines up. Bernice, I'd really like to talk about your beginnings as well. So let's talk a little bit about the West Side auction houses. How did that project relate to your concept that historic preservation is a key tool for revitalization?
So, by the way, David, you're amazing. Thank you. Yeah. So how does historic preservation is a key tool to revitalization. So I grew up in a historic neighborhood, a very poor historic neighborhood. And my dad was a painter, so I really understood the importance of, porches and clapboard siding. And I actually started this. I came from a place of energy efficiency in historic properties as well as a historic preservationist. Although I don't really care who died there or what was invented there. I care about the materials because these old growth materials are incredibly important. We don't make them like that anymore. So I actually tried to buy a dollar house from the city, but the city wouldn't let me buy that dollar house because I didn't have $40,000 to renovate it. I'm a typical millennial with student loan debt, without, I didn't have anything. I said, well, if I had $40,000, I would go to get a normal house. Like, why would I? And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. So long story short, that I got a vision, I put together a vision statement. I wanted to save these old houses. I didn't know how to do it because I couldn't do the dollar houses. And I was in the right place at the right time. The harder you work, the luckier you are. And I found an investor who was willing to go to the auction with me. And so I went to the city auction. I bought a couple properties, literally like 30 seconds. They auctioned them off like 30 seconds of property. It's insane. And we started there. And it was I would tell anybody to do it, but it was insanely difficult. I mean, it was sight unseen. You didn't know what you were buying. I bought a house that had 2 leaks and a foundation completely crumbling, and pipes that had busted over the winter. I mean, it goes on and on. But the auction process was easy. I was able to buy instantly, close, and then start, instead of dealing with the city or going through financing, which didn't exist then because the houses were worth $1 and banks didn't want to do it. So for me, it was just a really great tool. I actually went to the auction this year and won a property and then lost it because of some complications with the owner and all these things. But now, because the values have gone up, it's actually you're less likely to be able to buy something that cheap at the auction. Sadly, that's tool 7 years later is less effective. But still, you could buy a double in Buffalo for $38,000 at the auction, and that's still pretty smoking deal, all things considered. Now it used to be like 5 or 10,000. It's like, ugh. So anyway, so I think the auction property is a really great way. If you have an auction in your city, I do highly recommend it. If you can just stomach the reality that you're walking into something you can't necessarily control, and download YouTube if you don't have it, because you're going to need it. Get a Home Depot credit card or a Lowe's credit card and be ready to just cry and then regroup and then kick ass,
Yeah, Detroit had a similar auction at the county level, Wayne County. And we bought our first house just through a broker who I didn't think intended for us to see the house. It was a crazy story. Then we bought our next 5 through the Wayne County auction.
Perfect.
And that was all in 2014. Mm-hmm. And since then, I guess similar to Buffalo, asset prices have increased pretty dramatically. But more interestingly, actually, really the city of Detroit takes the best properties before they go to auction now. Mm-hmm. And they really have unique ways, I would say, of ensuring that people they want to buy them. So it is interesting. I think in a way the auction, it's definitely been manipulated by private investors from across the world in negative ways. But for someone who's just beginning, it could be a really powerful tool to get execution certainty, to get a house tied down and really get to work. And it was really
just to jump in on that too. So the city of Buffalo is doing the same thing now. The properties are going to the land bank first, right? So I actually purchased a property from the land bank, and I thought they shouldn't be serving people like me. I think they should be serving people that don't have the means as much. So I'll, but they're there to try to get these houses off the demo list, and so I would recommend people check their land banks if they have a local land bank. And if they don't have a local land bank, it would be something to look into, providing that it's ran by somebody who knows and cares about your city.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The cities have a tough job. I mean, it's really hard. You have to balance. You want these properties to go in the hands of those who will do the most good with it, and those also who really need the opportunity. But from a city's perspective, the last thing you want is to have to take back the home because someone didn't have the resources to fix it up. So it's definitely a tough balancing act. Like our company, so we 2.5 years ago we won an RFP by the Detroit Land Bank, City of Detroit, to effectively purchase over 300 parcels from the Detroit Land Bank, all within a 1/4 square mile area. And that came with its own political kind of consequences and inefficiencies and definite challenges. It's really. What was that?
Did you get them?
We got a lot of them. So,
I don't know if I could handle all that.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone really can in a way that is sustainable.
Right.
We have a phased approach, and most importantly, we just had to spend a lot of time. I think the city had, these what we thought were really unrealistic timelines for how you could get the project like this done, and we understood that the only way something like this happens, and literally all these properties within a 1/4 square mile area. So we're getting a 1/4 of the properties of the parcels in the area, but there are 100 families that live here, and there's no way we can be successful if those folks aren't on our team 1,000%, if they don't understand where we are at every step of the process, if they feel like the process isn't transparent, these are our allies. These are effectively our family. And if we can get them in, get them job opportunities, get them healthcare awareness, get them even financial literacy training, workforce development, so they can afford the houses that are coming up in the neighborhood, then really there's no point in moving forward. So we spend a lot of time doing that and making sure that we can create a neighborhood where we're really working class folks have the opportunity to purchase homes and have the same opportunity that millions of other Americans through the course of history have had to build wealth.
Right. Yeah, actually, I know we're kind of going back and forth, but so the Incremental Development Alliance, our whole focus is building wealth. Mm-hmm. It's building wealth through real estate. Yes, it's a capitalism society. I'm not changing the world tomorrow, but we know real estate. We can build wealth through it. People, I grew up in extreme poverty, but I acknowledge my privilege, but not everybody has that opportunity. And so getting people to understand that they can get financial literacy, they can get their credit score up, they can buy something, they can get someone to pay rent upstairs so they're not paying rent, so then they're more independent. It's everything in small scale.
Oh no.
Did we lose?
Lost her for a second. She must have lost her internet.
Development.
Oh, you're back.
Oh, it was frozen for a second.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm hearing is that, you're trying to empower people in your communities and be an example, leading the way for others to be involved. And I really think that's what inclusive development is all about. We're trying to transform communities from the ground up. And the kinds of work that you're doing, the opportunities that you're creating have a ripple effect across that community. And I'm really interested to talk and move on to our next question. And that's for David. And there seems to be, and I definitely would like to hear Bernice's take on this as well. But there seems to be a growing skepticism about homeownership, especially among our generation millennials, and whether or not it's a good investment. We're hearing a lot of things about this. But with Century Partners, you focused on sustainable residential housing development that creates pathways to home ownership, in addition to the rental properties that you do. So how does home ownership contribute to the holistic revitalization of a neighborhood, of a community? And do you have faith that home ownership is still one of the best ways for individual wealth building?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that we hear every day. I think particularly my generation, millennials, we kind of came into the workforce on the heels of a major recession, and the source of that recession was housing. But I worked in banking for a number of years, and had a pretty close-up view to how the housing recession happened, and it primarily was due to excessive leverage and risk taking. If you look at real estate now, asset prices in many cases are at the same level, if not higher, than where they were in 2000, before the crisis in 2008. And that's just because as the population increases, people need places to live. And so as an individual, as a consumer, you can choose to rent and pay money to somebody else's property every single month, or effectively, you can choose to pay money back to yourself, back to effectively your family. And part of that is due that the government has specific policies in place to create wealth via housing. This is the only asset where you can get 30-year financing for 3 to 4% in the world. There's no other asset type like that. This housing policy has created trillions of dollars of wealth. I think something like I saw a stat: 2/3 of all U.S. household wealth in the country is via real estate, either the house that you own or rental properties, so on and so forth. So this is not to say that I don't think of housing, personal housing, owner-occupied housing, as a place where you can get money quickly. If you look at it really as a 30-year investment, and over the course of that period, there will be some ups and downs, but hopefully over that 30 years, you're really just paying money back to yourself. You're able to, once you've paid that debt, you have flexibility now to pull money out the house to help finance your child's education, whether it's secondary school or college education. You have the opportunity, if you need to move, to rent out the house, and then you have a cash flow generating asset. And if you fall into some financial hardship, it is actually a lot easier to maintain where you live if you own your house and you have to have the bank foreclose on you than if you're just renting a home. You can be kicked out of your home if you fall behind your rent for 15 days. You can be kicked out in many places less than 2 months. Whereas just the foreclosure process alone, the last thing a bank wants to do typically is hold the house. So that's typically a more drawn out, legal process. So from a housing security perspective, I think from a wealth perspective, from an actual, having the money you're paying every month go to something that benefits you as opposed to other people, I think there's stability in homeownership that typically doesn't exist, in rental. And the fundamental fact is you do have to live somewhere. I mean, no matter what, you've got to live somewhere. So wouldn't you want the place where you're living, even if it's not making you rich? I mean, it's going effectively back to you or your family. You can pass it down, and you've got more increased flexibility and stability. And that's what we're seeing, particularly in places like Detroit. But it can't be speculative. If you look at the historical values of a home you're looking to purchase, and it's 3 times more than it's ever been before, something's wrong. That could suggest that the fundamentals are off, there may be a bubble. But if you're rational about it, if you're staying within your means, if you're not over leveraged, if you have fixed rate financing, so not an adjustable rate where the rate's going to spike up in a couple of years, oftentimes housing can be a really great investment that creates lots of stability from a generational perspective for individuals and households.
Yeah, and I want to have a follow-up question. And do you think that, having cities like in a big city like DC, Detroit, how important is it for our government to focus on housing as a way to, fight displacement or to curb kind of some of the negatives of hyper gentrification? Like because when I think about my neighborhood, it's like, most of the people in my neighborhood have lived here for 30 plus years. Mm-hmm. And there's a real sense of community, here. And I don't want to see that go away. So would you agree, is it helpful for local governments to focus on, equitable design in communities and focus on home ownership versus rental? Or is that kind of a good way of combating displacement, do you think?
I'm no expert here. I'd be the first to say that. I think you need both. I think you need policies in place because not everyone can be a homeowner. Not everyone desires being a homeowner, and frankly, not everyone should be a homeowner. But I do think people deserve the ability to live in places that are fully functioning. And I think that's what housing affordability does from a rental perspective. And then I think from a stability perspective, there is no stronger way to own equity in a place than to own equity in a home. I mean, you can't be displaced by gentrification if you own your home. You can be, people can give you offers, people can really pressure you to leave, but ultimately, if you've got that deed in hand, it is very difficult to displace. That is really kind of the main way for both particularly communities of color, that they can benefit when development and gentrification does happen. Because if you look, gentrification now, I think it's really a terrible word. People really kind of their faces scrunch up when they mention it. But to me, in my opinion, the only negative, if I told the average person, hey, the neighborhood you're currently living in 5 years, it'll be safer. There'll be a coffee shop. There'll be places where you can do things. You can get your dry cleaning done. You'll call the police will come. You call the fire people will come in a timely manner. They say, hey, sign me up. Where can I get that? When you tell them, hey, all these great things are going to happen, but you, unfortunately, aren't going to be able to participate because you're displaced, because you can no longer afford it. I think that's when it becomes really problematic. So a lot of our work is we try to bring in all that good stuff that comes with development, the safety, the security, the increased connectivity that can potentially happen without the bad effects of development, which oftentimes is displacing the people who really deserve it the most. They stuck through some of the worst times. They're the ones who really deserve a neighborhood that is filled with the resources that are left for oftentimes decades.
Agreed. And I think the cities and towns that are getting that right or focusing on those facts are going to be the ones that are going to be more successful long-term in developing that kind of neighborhood, environment that they're looking for. That's really fascinating.
So what kind of neighborhoods do we want? Oftentimes, I think there's this potential myth that people actually really do want diverse neighborhoods. I think you had decades of policy that financed the creation of really monolithic communities, that they were intentionally wanted to be monolithic. They intentionally wanted They wanted things to be the same. They wanted to be filled with people who looked and acted like them. So we have to ask ourselves, is the policy going to create mixed income communities, mixed race communities, really diverse communities? We have to be honest with ourselves if that's what we want. And if we can agree that we want that type of real, true, authentic diversity, I think the housing policies, will follow. But ultimately, it really comes down to the public will, oftentimes, to say, hey, this is what we really want. We want to say what sounds nice, but in reality, we kind of like a place where we don't have to be confronted with poverty when we walk out of our door, or we don't have to be confronted with people who look a little different.
Agreed. And I think there is a lot of public will. We've done some really good surveys and polls of our folks in local government. And what we're hearing is the thing that they want the most help with is how to do that, how to do, equitable neighborhoods, how to build affordable housing, how to have, and I think that we are, seeing that message, or at least I would hope. Bernice, how do you feel about this topic? Do you think housing is the key to wealth development? Is it still kind of the tried and true? Is that good for our generation?
Well, I have lots of opinions on it. I live in one of the most diverse neighborhoods in probably New York State, and there's 50 languages at my local high school. And I'm the white girl that's probably more wealthy than most of them. And that's saying a lot because I don't pay myself a lot, I could make a lot more, I should say. But my husband and I are 2 incomes, no kids. And we're the white people with a Subaru and a kayak next to the refugees, and I feel guilty at times. But we get our block club together and I look at our block club and I think how diverse it is and, how sometimes we struggle because we can't reach everybody with different languages and how beautiful that is in so many different ways. And so I think, there are many solutions and many thoughts. I believe that getting people in to buy property, I believe that getting small businesses into our communities is a critical way to have those folks buy in and to, build their own wealth. If they rent a storefront and that storefront is a unique, Thai place, whatever, or refugee bazaar that we have, it does build their wealth. They're building their storefronts, they're building their community, and sometimes they can't own because they're not even technically citizens yet, or whatever the case may be. But we have to embrace those people. I've been on a mission to buy all these little mini mixed-use buildings so I can take the storefronts and rent them out to people who have a dream to own their own small business. Like, you want to start a pie company? Fine. You want to do popcorn? Sure. You want to do a nail salon? Let's do it. And I'm trying to buy those because and then work with them to buy those buildings over time, get their credit up, get their, whatever they need to get to a place where they can purchase that building. Because I don't want to have to own it over time. I want them to have their life's work. So I think that it's for people who have the opportunity and the ability to help people build their own wealth. I think it's really up to us to help people. I don't have a lot of faith that governments will figure it out. I'm not saying anything negative. I'm just being honest. I feel that it is really up to the citizens. And you do that by starting a block club, planting flowers. If you're like me, I can buy a property for a potential nail salon owner. It's like that's how I look at things. I think we just have to work together and help each other. And you only do that by saying hello to your neighbors and knowing them and helping them when they need it. So I guess that's my opinion.
I love that. I don't think you should feel guilty about the privilege you're bringing to your community. The community needs that. I think one of our missions is to show that you can make money in underprivileged communities. And the reason why I said that, what that means is that there's value in these communities. There are people who have lived here for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. There are people who've created culture and they've created connectivity. And they have stories. All these stories are incredibly valuable. These places aren't places where you only put charity money, or these places just need grants to get anything done. It's with a little bit of money, these places these places are filled with people who are incredibly ambitious and capable,
Yes.
intelligent, and resourceful. And this is actually, I think, a better use of for-profit money in many cases than some of the other more glitzier and special things. But it does, in a way, take a position and perspective of privilege to help other people see that all these things that you have here are amazing. This is incredibly valuable. Let's work together to get you the resources you need so that we can create a bigger impact for what we have here. So my experience, I'm from South Jamaica, Queens, New York. I grew up in a very poor neighborhood, and I was put, at the age of 11, 12 into a very wealthy private school on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and got to really see what wealth and power and privilege was. And that was game-changing to me, right. Just to see what you can actually actualize, with resources and with intention and organization. But at the same time, I don't think we can give up on government because we're voting for them.
Right. I agree. I'm not.
We are supporting that. And I think I always hate identifying problems that I don't particularly myself want to help contribute to, because I have no desire to run for any elected office. But I do think it's really important that we encourage those who are capable and talented and care about communities from a real level to, run for office, and so that we can have some more accountability, for our elected officials.
Oh yeah. I just ran for council, but I am not running for council because they kicked me off because of a word. Really. Okay. It was devastating actually, because I felt that, this is my neighborhood. Do I necessarily want to be a politician? No, but I feel like there's so many great things we aren't doing, could be doing, getting access to tax credits and figuring out affordable housing and getting inclusive development, bringing in experts that can help us understand how to do inclusive development. There's just so many things our governmental leaders can do, but I have made a decision to do it on a private level a long time ago. And then I reiterated my push to do it on a private level because politics is tough,
Definitely.
So, yeah. But I will say thank you for saying the privilege thing to me, because it's hard. It's hard for me really with white skin, it's hard. I'm just like, I just want to help. I'm always like, I want to help. So I think that it really is up to us to just band together, and no one is going to help and save us. We have to do it ourselves, and we have to lift everybody up with it, and not everybody sees the world that way, but I think most people do. Most, if 99+% really want to help others.
I totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both so much. I think that's an amazing point to wrap up on. And thank you for joining us. Two incredible community leaders, Buffalo, Detroit. We really appreciate having you on the Real Places webcast. And please do find these folks' information online if you haven't already gotten yourselves familiar with Buffalove Development and Century Partners and the great stories that they're making happen in their communities. So thanks for joining this month's edition of Real Places. And please check out our